Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. We're coming to you from the Monroe County Library System. There's going to be 6 Monroe County Library System staff sharing some of our quarantine reads with you. That's our theme for this week. So we hope that you listen, that you laugh along with us, and that you find some titles that you want to add to your to be read list. And as you're watching, if you're wondering, how can I get my hands on these books? Since the library is currently closed in line with state and local health guidelines, you can request physical copies, hardcover, paperback, CD audios, large print, through our online catalog. That is still open and available. Throw those requests out there. As soon as the library system is allowed to start opening up in whatever way that turns out to be, then those books will start moving and they will start coming to you. You can also get your hands on these in your home very quickly if you request digital versions, and every single title that we talk about today is available digitally in some format. So there are 3 different ways to get those digital versions, pardon me. You can get them through Overdrive, which you may also hear referred to as Libby, as the Libby is the name of the Overdrive app, and that provides ebooks and audiobooks. You can get them through Hoopla, which provides ebooks, audiobooks, and also has movies and music and graphic novels. And you can also get them through RB Digital, which has audiobooks and also magazines, access to Acorn TV, and access to the great courses. And the great thing in particular about Hoopla and RB Digital is that there is never a wait. Those items are automatically available as soon as you go in there and see them and think that it looks interesting. So I hope that you take advantage of those. And I'm going to introduce our librarians who are with us now. And as I introduce each one, since our theme this week is quarantine reads, we are going to share what our favorite quarantine snack or recipe has been. So I'll start with myself. I'm Jennifer Graneski. I'm the community librarian at the Dundee Branch Library. And my favorite snack has been my son's. He's 11, loves to bake, and he's been baking brookies, which is a chocolate chip cookie layer on the bottom and a brownie layer on the top. And he's been baking brookies for us about every other week. So, but they are delicious, can't complain. And he's making them and doing the dishes, so even better. So that's mine. And let's go to Christine Greggs. Christine works in our tech department. She is the Monroe County Library System graphic designer. And what is your favorite quarantine snack been?
I've been really into, it's Quaker Oats. They make rice cakes, but they're like small, like chips almost. They call them Rice Crisps. And they're cheddar. They have different flavors, but I've really been into the cheddar flavor right now. I'm telling myself they are lower calorie, even though they're probably not much better than regular chips. But in my head, since it's rice, it's healthy and it's okay.
It's rice. And it has the Quaker guy, so it's got to be good for you.
It's got to be.
Right? I agree. All right, also with us is Kristen Brown. Kristen is a reference librarian at the Bedford branch. What have you been enjoying, Kristen?
I have 2 youngins, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so we've been doing a lot of baking, but we've been trying to keep it a little bit on the healthy end because my children don't need any more sugar than necessary. So we've been making cookies, but we've been doing it with like the mashed bananas with the cocoa powder and the oats. And then we throw some peanut butter in there and some dark chocolate. So those actually are pretty healthy and they're not too bad sugar-wise. So we've been making those, and the cleanup's really easy. So that's our snack go-to.
Nice. I'm going to come hang outside your house and peek in the windows. Are you making cookies today, Kristen?
I'll hand you some through the screen. It'll be like a drive-through.
We also have with us Jen McCarty, and Jen is a reference librarian at the Ellis Library. What is your favorite snack or recipe been during quarantine?
We have also been on the baking train. Lots of cookies. We made cupcakes last night, which I actually just frosted, and they're crazy delicious. Chocolate. They wanted to try chocolate this time. But my favorite thing I think that we made and I think I was probably the only one that really liked them, were lemon white chocolate cookies.
Ooh.
So not
Sounds
healthy.
delicious.
They had a ton of sugar, but they were super delicious. And I will definitely make them again as soon as I can get my hands on some fresh lemons.
Lemon, I love lemon. Anything lemon.
Me too. And they were like, the cookie was light, but then it had the white chocolate chips for the sweetness. Oh, so good.
Delicious. Now I'm hungry. Now I feel like I should have brought a snack with me. All right, next we have Kelly Venier, who is the branch technician at the South Rockwood Library. And what have you been eating that's delicious and will also make me hungry?
I eat everything, but I'm not a baker like you guys. I don't have the patience to read directions, so I like something that is easy and available. So we have been eating a lot of the peanut butter filled pretzel squares.
Ooh.
Yeah, we get those by bulk.
Solid choice.
Actually, I got like 3 containers of them at Costco, which you know how obscene those things are. They're like this big. And so we've just been eating those because, yeah, I don't bake. Kristen's the baker.
Yeah.
Well, those sound delicious
I'm not
as
arguing
well.
with that one.
And finally with us, we have JODI'S, and she is the community librarian at the Bedford Library. And what have you been snacking on during quarantine, Jodi?
I've been snacking on everything. I have a 15-year-old daughter who also loves to bake, so there's constant desserts. We've gone through an insane amount of Oreos, I can tell you that much. And she's made cookies and lemon bars and white chocolate cheesecake and all kinds of stuff. The sweet part of that story is that she makes a large amount of desserts and then splits them up into carry-out containers, and we drop them off on all of her friends' doorsteps because she really misses her friends.
So nice.
So we drive around pretty regularly to do that, but of course we always have to save some for ourselves. So I'm sure that I've put on the quarantine 15 easily. So, but you know, when we get back to work, it'll all wash out, right?
Melt away.
Yeah, I mean,
I hope so.
Everything's fine. It's fine.
It's right. It's all good. It's all good. What happens in quarantine stays in quarantine.
sure.
It
Sure.
sure does.
Except for the books
Sure.
we're reading.
Except
I
for the
hear
books
the-
you're reading. That's right.
I hear the calories agreed to that. They don't count.
That's right. Who wants to get us started on what you've been reading during quarantine? Don't all go first.
Hey, I'll go first. I'll go first if.
Cool. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Jodi.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have 3 books that I'm going to talk about today, and I made a few notes, so forgive me while I read those. I'll be looking at a teleprompter over here. That's what I'm going to try to do. The first one I want to talk about is called Where the Crawdads Sing. I don't know how many people have read that book yet, but it's by Delia Owens, and it's actually the first fiction book that she has written. She's a nonfiction writer. And what really comes through is she's a naturalist. I don't honestly remember, and I didn't write this down, what her background is, but her love for all things nature and the disappearing environments, natural environments, it comes across really strongly in this story. So the story alternates between 1969 and the early 1950s in a North Carolina coastal town. In 1969, a favorite son in this small town is found murdered. And so it ends up going back to the childhood of this family who lived essentially off the grid in the swamps. And Kaya Clark is the main character of the story. She's at the time that the story begins, she's 6 years old. Her father is a World War II veteran who is an alcoholic and the family's been devastated financially because of his behaviors. And so, and he's abusive to everybody except Kaya. So it's kind of nice that Kaya's not one who's being abused in the story. But what happens is her 3 older siblings end up leaving one at a time, and then her mom leaves when she's 6 years old, and then finally her last sibling leaves really towards the beginning of the story, and Kaya is kind of left alone with her father, but he's pretty useless, so to learn how to raise herself. And so she learns from her surroundings in nature how how to grow up, and it's really a pretty amazing story, coming of age kind of story. But the town has condemned her because she's lives in the swamp essentially, and so she ends up getting arrested for the murder of this young man back in 1969 in the current day of the setting. And so, you know, it's just a very interesting how it all happens, and it ends up being it's a popular book to recommend to YA readers. The focus on the story, it's very character driven. So if you really like stories that are character driven, it's a very atmospheric kind of setting. It talks a lot about nature, about birds, about fish. She learns how to fish and makes her living off of the things that she catches. It's really pretty amazing story. And it's considered a read alike for like a To Kill a Mockingbird kind of a story. So if you like that kind of thing, Where the Crawdads Sing, it's available as an ebook and as an e-audiobook through Overdrive/Libby. Has huge waiting lists on it, so it also almost makes me sad to talk about it when I know that it'll take a while for you to get to it. But it was the best book that, this is why I told Jennifer I had to talk about it. It was the best book that I've read in a very long time, and it was one of those books that I didn't want to end because I knew that the next many books that I would read would not be as good as that book. So and I passed it off to my son's girlfriend who's 21 years old. She read it in one day. So that's the kind of book that it is. I can't read like that, but she does. So so that was my first one. The second one that I'm actually currently reading right now, I'm about halfway through, is Julian Fellowes' Belgravia. So Julian Fellowes is the writer of Downton Abbey. And Belgravia is another very similar story. So Belgravia is a Victorian age story, tells about a couple of different families, one that's in the upper class. There's an earl and a duke and duchess and their people, and then there's a common family who is trying to make their way up into the upper classes. They're earning a lot of money by building housing in London, but you know, they can't make it into the upper classes because that's just not how the class setting is. So the very first chapter of the story is set in 1815, the night before the Battle of Waterloo. But then the rest of the story jumps forward into the 1840s Victorian age kind of thing. And one of so the daughter of the common family has had a baby by the son of the upper class family, and that baby was put up for adoption. And so now it's going to be this big, you know, now it's been revealed to the Duchess that this is actually her grandson. And so, and of course her son died in the Battle of Waterloo, and he was the only child of that Earl. So anyway, I don't know how this is going to end, but it's a fairly similar to a Downton Abbey kind of thing. So if you like that sort of a story, that's the story that it is.
And just to pop in, I don't know if you were just getting ready to say this, but Belgravia apparently has been turned into a 6-episode TV series.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's on something called Epics. I don't know what that is, so I've not seen it. The first 2 episodes are available on Amazon Prime. So I haven't watched them, but those are out there. And I was like, ooh, I'm going to put this on my list. And then I saw that I couldn't watch the last 4 episodes unless she got this Epics thing. So I don't know. But if you got Epics, you can also
or if you don't, read the book, and then
that's right.
There you go.
Show anyway.
That's
All
how
right,
they
sorry
get
to
you hooked
interrupt
on
you,
those.
Jody.
No, that's okay. That's how they get you hooked on those things. You can watch the first 2 episodes on. And I had just watched Victoria too, by the way. So I mean, I'm really into historical fiction anyway. So those are some of the kinds of things that I really like. Mysteries and historical fiction are the 2 that I like the most. And Where the Crawdads Sing was actually both of those. So that was part of why I loved that one so much.
That sounds awesome.
The other one that I was going to talk about is called In the Company of Sherlock Holmes, and it is actually a bunch of short stories written by best-selling mystery novelists, and some of those are Michael Connelly, Sarah Paretsky, Jeffrey Deaver, John Lescrow, and Cornelia Funke. So there's a whole bunch of stories in here. I think there's 20 plus stories in this. And each story, and they're paying homage to Arthur Conan Doyle and how influential the Sherlock Holmes stories were to mystery writers in general. And so all of these people felt like They've done multiple of these, as a matter of fact, but this is the one that I had read. So it's really interesting. I listened to it. It's really interesting to listen to. Really helpful that they have different readers for each of the short stories too. So you really get a different flair from each of the different authors. So I kind of liked that. Sherlock Holmes doesn't go out of style. And now that we've got, you know, I mean, I realize Robert Downey Jr. has been a little while ago, but because of the Iron Man thing, younger people are into Robert Downey Jr., so then they watch Sherlock Holmes, right? But also Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman has made Sherlock Holmes popular with an entirely new generation of people. So I feel like it's something that doesn't ever go out of style. I thought it was really interesting that Moriarty played a bigger role in all of these stories, really, than a Sherlock style character. Like Sherlock's not actually in these stories. It's a current day person who acts like Sherlock Holmes. But there's always a nemesis, and in a couple of the stories, Sherlock did not win. So that was kind of the interesting part of that. And that is available as an e-audio on both Hoopla and Overdrive. I think I failed to mention Belgravia is available as e-audios and e-books on a couple of those, on 2 different formats, like 2 different of our services. So, and that's it for my 3 books.
Yay! Awesome choices, Jody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Those sound like good quarantine reads, things that you just kind of sort of sink into a whole different place or get really involved in a mystery. All right. Has anybody else read Where the Crawdads Sing? I haven't. We were going to do it as a book club until all this went down.
It's on my list.
I've had several patrons that were like, you have to read this when they brought it back in. And I just kept saying, I'm going to put myself on the list. And I just didn't. And now I'm thoroughly regretting it because that does sound like an awesome book. I feel like I would really enjoy that one.
So as you all know, but the patrons out there watching don't necessarily. My mom worked for the Monroe County Library System for 40 years, and she's got this group of people that she are avid readers, go through many books every single week. And so they've gotten into this book chain where they're passing things around amongst each other, and Where the Crawdads Sing has made the rounds of all those people. And that's how I got lucky enough to get a copy. It was actually one of her friend's copies that I managed to get my hands on.
Oh, so, nice.
Yeah,
that's a great
it's worked
idea,
out pretty
though.
good.
Yeah.
You got to have your books.
Right.
Right. Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
All right.
So I'm going to start with The Thunderhead, or Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. This is number 2 in the Arc of the Scythe series. The first book is called The Scythe. Neil Shusterman wrote the Unwind series, which I think a great many people have read, and it's pretty awesome. But he rocks it at dystopian literature, and I just love him. I like reading books that I could see could maybe come true, and I feel like this is one of them. And the deeper I get into this trilogy, the more freaked out I become. So I started this book actually in July on a girls' trip, and put it aside because I have 2 boys who are 8 and 6 and work full time. So it's hard for me to sit down and actually physically read a book. Generally, I read audiobooks, or I listen to audiobooks when I'm in the car doing chores. So this was really fun to be able to sit down and actually read and give it my undivided attention. And now that I have that time, I went through it pretty fast. But this being the second book in the series, the main characters are Rowan and Citra. In the first book, they were side apprentices. In the second book, Rowan goes on a vigilante mission and is kind of in his own thing. Citra becomes partnered with one of the great scythes in the scythedom. And as the book goes on, you meet some new challenges that the society is facing. The Thunderhead basically is the all-seeing, all-being government.
Hello, Kitty.
Oscar is all about this.
The creepy thing that has been creeping me out is that it started somewhat as the cloud. So everything, all the data that gets put and stored into the cloud or the digital memory space, the Thunderhead becomes aware, and it is the basis of society now. Like, he is the one that looks over everything, and humanity has evolved into immortality, and people are rendered deadish, not dead, and they're taken to revival centers. And because of that, they have to have an order of scythes that kind of control the people and
population,
population under control. So they have people that come in and they have to be in the society, and they have to be an intern, and they have all this teaching. But there's a new order that's coming in, a new order that likes to kill and kills for fun, not for the means of humanity. So that's one of the challenges that they face in the second book. I just got the third book, which I think Jen McCarty's going to be talking about, and I'm really excited. I just started that one. So hopefully Jen doesn't give away any spoilers, but I love Neil Shusterman. I love him more the older I get, because I think it is a scary world. And I think when you're younger, when you're a young adult, you're kind of naive to that. But as you get older, you're like, oh, wow, well, that could really happen. So that it's creepy and I love it. The other book that I'm reading, I just started, it's an audiobook. And, I'm spending a lot more time with my children. And, I've taken different roles with my children as teacher and mother. And, it's times like these when you're in close contact that you're like, man, am I really doing as good as I think I am with parenting? So, I went to Hoopla and I found a nonfiction by Brene Brown. It's called The Gifts of Imperfect Parenting. It's a really short read. It's only 2 hours. And it is phenomenal. I've been talking about it with everyone, especially my sister, Kristen. But it has made me feel so good about what we're doing. And, as a society, we have so many social pressures and like a box that you think that you should fit in as a parent. And Brene Brown, who is amazing and is, glorious. Like, I just want to be her neighbor so that I can go have coffee and be like, so what do you think?
Yes.
Tell me if I'm doing good. But everything that she says is awesome. And I love my there's 3 different parts that I've just really attached to, and I've made notes, and I kind of feel like they're going to be my mantra from here on out. One of the things that she talks about is shame parenting versus guilt parenting. And, a lot of people parent the way that they are parented, or they try to do the exact opposite of what they're parenting, depending on what they're in. But shame versus guilt, I don't know. I've always kind of felt those were related. But in this book, she states like shame is you're a bad boy. And guilt is you're a good boy, but you're making bad choices. And that's one thing that I've always taught my kids from the very beginning is you're making bad choices. You need to make a better choice or give them choices. So that made me feel a lot better and confident in my parenting struggles. One of the other things that she talks about that I loved was she says, we cannot love our children more than we love ourselves. We just don't have that to offer. And that you guys are going on the same journey. Sometimes your kid's ahead of you and then you have to pull them back. And sometimes you're ahead of your kid and you have to pull them back. But it's a journey that you're going on together. And I love that because there's so many times that as parents, you get so consumed with parenting and your children that you lose yourself and you lose your sense of self. And I mean, my kids are 8 and 6, and I feel like I just within this past year or two has found myself again. What I like to do when I'm alone. I'm not like, I don't feel guilty about it. I walk around aimlessly like, oh God, what do? I don't have kids. Like, it's taken a really long time to get to that point, but I know that I'm a better parent for that. And when she said that, I was like, yes, that's so true. The other thing that she talked about was hope and her studies with hope and hope parenting. And, we live in this society where we don't want to hurt feelings and everyone is kind of on edge. And, we live in a society where everyone deserves a trophy. And she agrees with that, but she disagrees. She says hope is part of the struggle that you teach your kids. If you're giving your kids a thumbs up every single time, they're never going to know the benefits or the rewards or that feeling of achievement when they finally get there. Like if you're doing something and you get a thumbs down, you finally put that hard work and you get a thumbs up. That's an incredible feeling and it pushes you to be more successful. So I thought that was incredible, and everything that she says, like now, I just want to listen to everything that she listens to or that she has to say, because I think she's
sounds like I need that.
Incredibly smart and amazing. So I'm riding high on that right now because I just finished that.
Fantastic recommendation.
Yeah.
Well, and Hoopla is
my
awesome for finding books like that. I'll go
too.
on Hoopla if I want to find a book.
And it's like I said, it's only 2 hours and 6 minutes. So like you know, if you're doing dishes, 20 minutes, right? You know, like everything that she says is awesome. And it just made me feel so much better, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who is feeling beat down and frustrated in, you know, the new positions that we're all put into for homeschooling and, you know, all the togetherness. So
as my 6-year-old is coming out here to show me the sign that I made that says, "Stop, don't bother mom."
yeah.
And what does this mean?
See, look,
Did you know that was on your door, Mom? Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to show you
So
that.
yeah, if you need
Thank
some
you.
affirmation out there because you're just not feeling the homeschooling and it's uncertain, I think that Brene will have some kind
Thank
of
you.
message to make you feel like you're doing a great job and we're all in this together. And it's okay to question it, because we're all on the same journey and no one knows what the heck they're doing. So that's helpful.
We're all lost.
Yeah.
That's amazing. As I mentioned earlier, I have an 11-year-old, and who knew 11 was complicated? But it is, and it's been made more complicated by him not being able to go to school and see his friends and get the affirmation that he gets there. So that's awesome. I will probably be downloading that later tonight.
I actually just did download that one, so just to let you guys know.
Oh, good.
It's on my phone. I just
already
finished
there.
doing it. And my kids are all grown up, so, and you don't want to hear this, but it doesn't get any easier when they're 26,
it
21, and 15. So, yeah.
I'm sure it doesn't.
Hey, you know,
And
the
one of the
problems only get larger and
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
and more impactful.
I'm sure. I'm not looking forward to any of it, but it'll be great.
It'll be great.
It's
It'll be
quite the
fine.
journey.
One of the
It's all
things she
fine.
talks about, Jodi, is she talks about one of her, like she talks about how she teaches shame parenting versus guilt parenting. And she had an older listener come up to her and tell her, I think her daughter was 52 and she was in her 70s. And she said that her daughter or her mom wrote her a note and said, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea what I was doing." But she said, even though I'm 52, she said that has made a huge impact on my life and the way that now I treat my children and their grandchildren. And she said it's a trickle down effect. So she said, like, even though you think that you're not doing great, you know, it's still, you know, you still have room to change, which that's hope for me too.
Good.
Hope is
That's
part of the
awesome.
struggle. I got the hope.
To stay on the Brene Brown train, I'm going to have Christine go next because she has another book by the same author.
Oh, awesome.
Yep, I love Brene too. Everything Kelly said is so spot on. She started as a social worker and she's actually a research academic. She's very well known for her TED Talk on vulnerability. That's where her name really got out there a while ago. And she's just so shoot from the hip. Everything she says is relatable. She knows the things that we're all kind of embarrassed by and we feel a little awkward about. Daring greatly. I never buy books, guys. Since I started working at the library, I pretty much just listen to audiobooks. That's the way I take in information. But I had to actually purchase Daring Greatly. It's one of her earlier ones. I don't know if I said that already. It's available from us on hardcover and audio, or Overdrive for audio and for ebook. This is one of her earlier pieces where she's talking about the broader concept of vulnerability and what do we do with it. It's the title Daring Greatly is actually based on a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, where it's the story of the man in the arena, which to paraphrase says that it's not the critic standing in the audience that counts, the one who isn't doing anything, the one who's pointing and laughing. That's not who we're rooting for. That's not who we're cheering for. We're cheering for the guy who goes into the arena, dares greatly, takes his chances, and maybe he fails and maybe he succeeds with massive success. But it's the effort to get past that. I don't know what I'm doing. This is new. This is scary. That's what we appreciate collectively as people. It's just, we appreciate vulnerability and expressions of it in other people, but we ourselves are always very afraid to share that. And I just thought it was a timely read for this. When we're all doing things that are very new, we're facing kind of a time of scarcity where we're homeschooling our children, we're trying to work from home, we're trying to figure out how to get groceries and how to get masks and how to best keep everyone safe. I thought it was just a good time to kind of refresh on some of that. The idea that what do we do when we feel vulnerable? Well, we armor up, especially as women. There is a certain pressure on us to look perfect. It's different for men and for women, but women especially. We're going to go out, do great at our jobs, come home, have dinner on the table, perfect spread, lovely candlelight, have the kids ready, clean, in bed, and look picture perfect while doing the whole thing. And yeah, that's not stressful at all, right? That doesn't wear us down, get to you over time. So we want to project this perfect image. And after that starts to wear, we start to numb. I think she says it so much better than me. She's so relatable. What do we do? Everyone has different ways of numbing, not just necessarily the things you think of like alcohol or anything like that, but maybe we have not just one slice of cake, but maybe we have the whole pan of cake. We're not enjoying the cake. That should be something that is good and comforting and experiencing the flavor. We're just, nom, 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 nom. Okay, well, that's gone now. What do I do next? Or we're not really paying attention to that next Netflix show we're binging on. It's just chattering while our brain is somewhere else. We're not really taking that moment to reset, to ground, to look around. And when we do that for too long, we start losing perspective with our friends and our family. When we numb too much, trying to block out the bad, Renee's concern is that we also block our ability to have joy and to really experience the things that are good about life. So she's all about practicing gratitude, talking to friends and family who can relate to what we're going through. So, I mean, yeah, Renee's she's awesome. Kelly mentioned that she's on Hoopla for the parenting, the imperfections of parenting, joys of imperfections of parenting. Mm-hmm. She also has another one, the power of vulnerability, that's on Hoopla, and that's another shorter one. She's talking to an audience, kind of about her work. She does a lot of guest lecturing and stuff like that. So that's a good way to also get an introduction to her in a relatively shorter amount of time if you want to try her out, kind of get a feel of her. But I can't recommend Brene enough. She's
I need to make some requests.
The other book, I haven't been into it long. It's I'm Sorry I'm Late, I Didn't Want to Come by Jessica Pan. Which it just sounded fun. Yeah. And I'm also, once again, reading that or listening to that on audio. It's on Hoopla as an ebook if you prefer to read it instead. But again, I like the listening. I like audio so I can do chores and putter around while I'm listening. Jessica Pan is a writer, and she has always wanted to travel and go abroad, and she does. She goes to China. She ends up in England with her husband. He's an introvert. I am as well. I relate to that. One of the things I appreciated about her was that she says, even though I tried to do these different things to kind of break out of my shell, I'm not saying that introverts have to change. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being an introvert. I just was in a place in my life where I needed to make some changes. And this is what I did. So she starts, when she's in England, I think she gets to a point where we sometimes happens. She changes jobs, she goes freelance, so she doesn't have a steady workplace to go to and meet new people and, make connections. The friends that she has already in England start moving away, some get married, the situation changes. So she finds herself kind of isolated in this place where it's just her and her husband, and she's writing freelance, so she's just kind of puttering around in her pajamas, not going out very often. And she realizes that it's kind of impacting her. She wants to have a better, quality of life, I guess. So she gets herself into a class to kind of extrovert herself. They have her do a series of challenges. I thought, which was one of the hilarious ones, was just to go to the train station in England and just talk to people about literally anything, like doesn't matter what. So she just randomly blurts out to this guy, and they're in England. Who's the Queen of England? And he looks at her like, God, you're stupid. And he says, Victoria. And she stops and she stares and she's like, wait, what? And she says it again. And now she's totally she's been broken out of any type of awkwardness of herself, because as we all know, the Queen of England is not Victoria. It's, yeah, it's Elizabeth. So she said, wait, I'm so sorry, sir. One more time, who's the Queen of England? And he's like, Victoria, like he's so irritated by her. She doesn't care because she's just fascinated by the answer. And she asks another person now, and that person says Victoria as well. So now she's in this whole other, like, wait, do I know who the Queen of England is? What's going on? So she's a fun, light, entertaining read so far. I'm only about halfway through. But if you're just looking for something where people are putting themselves out of their normal, sphere, their comfort level, it's an enjoyable little story. So.
That sounds fun.
Awesome. That does sound fun. All right, Kristen or Jen, one of you prefer to go next? Oh, Kristen, you're muted.
Okay, well then I guess I'll go.
Jen's going. You missed your chance, Kristen.
Sorry, Kristen. All right. Okay, so I have 3 books I wanted to talk about. The first, we'll just start with The Toll, since that goes with what Kelly already talked about. The Toll is the 3rd book in the Scythe trilogy. Kelly already said a lot of what I would say. Schusterman takes these incredibly dark, heavy, complicated topics and makes them accessible and makes them seem like, oh, this could so happen. Which Kelly already talked to you a little bit about, what these books are about. So we're in this, utopian society, everything is great, but it isn't. And it makes you think about so much about what you would want. Like, if your life is endless, what do you do with yourself? Where is there meaning if you have an infinite amount of time? And The Toll really kind of wraps that up. It's finishing. I'm trying not to give away too many spoilers. So I'm not going to talk about it a ton because I feel like Kelly introduced the series so well, so I'm not going to talk about it a ton, but it really gives you so many thoughts of what would I do with an endless life? What parts of our lives now give us meaning? And it's, like I said, it's so heavy and so complicated, but it's so well done. This was actually one of the first things I read once the whole lockdown thing started. And I kept putting it off. I kept picking it up and putting it back down, going, okay, I know I liked the first 2 books, but do I really want to delve into this? And once I committed, I think I read it in a day because it's just so well written and it's just so incredibly well done that I just wanted to dive into the world. And then, I couldn't stop myself.
I'm nervous to read the 3rd one, and then you have that feeling at the end of reading a series where you're like, it's over.
It's so worth it.
And then it's hard to get back on one.
Like Jodi had said.
So good though. And so I'm just going to be really brief on that because I don't want to say too much.
I appreciate that.
The other 2 books are also series, and I don't know where you guys are at, but I have a stack of things that I could read. I had a bunch of downloads that I could read. I wanted comfort food. I wanted comfort books in this really weird time. Mm-hmm. So I actually went back and reread 2 series that I previously read in their totality. So the first one I'll talk a little bit about is Hounded. That's the first book in the Iron Druid series. And I went through and I've read all of the books now. But I love this series so much for people who are fans of fantasy fiction and supernatural fiction. The main character of Hounded is a druid. He's 2,000 years old. He's the last, basically, druid of his kind. So he survived all this time, mostly in hiding, because it's so hard to explain this without throwing out a lot of fantasy terminology if you're not super geeky like me. Basically, an Irish god wants to kill him, so he's been hidden for for majority of this 2,000 years. Obviously, this first book things start to pick up. He gets found. He's got to deal with things. But what I love so much about this series is it's a fantasy series. It's a supernatural series. It takes a lot of pieces. He's got a team of lawyers. One's a werewolf, one's a vampire. That's just funny. It just is. probably the best character in the entire series is Atticus's wolfhound Oberon.
Yes.
You would think a dog is the best character, but
He
oh my God,
is.
Oberon's the best. He can talk to his dog. He can actually communicate with his dog. And Oberon is hilarious because it gives you, like, his conversations are very dog-centric. He can't tell time. You were gone for 12 years. It's been 5 minutes. He's obsessed with sausages and poodles, and it's so funny. And what I also love about this series as they go on is you have all these other sort of mythological stuff in it. Like within the first couple of pages, one of my favorite bits is they make a joke about Thor and how basically everyone can agree that Thor is a jerk.
Yep.
And so you get all of these mythological pantheons together throughout the series. You have the Norse, you have the Greek gods, the Roman gods and goddesses. And the books themselves are just so funny and so entertaining. You have Christian gods come in. You have one of my favorite Native American characters, Coyote, who comes in throughout them. I'm not sure if he's in the first one or not, but Hounded is a great place to start. It's I know on Overdrive or Hoopla or Libby, I'm pretty sure there's a compendium that has the first 3 books. So if that's available, it's a fantastic place to start because you have the first 3 books right there ready to go. And they're quick reads. They're so much fun, and I can't recommend that whole series enough. So my third and final book is the last book in a series. It just came out. It's called Smoke Bitten. This is absolutely one of my favorite series of all times. So I went back and I read all of the Mercy Thompson books. And I can't remember the number. Smoke Bitten is the most recent one. I think it's 12. So there's a lot of them. The biggest thing I say whenever I recommend this book to someone or any of the books in the series, do not judge it by its cover. Because the covers, this one's not too bad. The cover of Moon Called, which is the very first book in the series, looks like a trashy romance novel. And that's not at all what you get with this series. So I always tell people, do not judge
like
it.
Trashy romance novels.
I have no problem with trashy romance. Go for it. I love it too. But it's not at all indicative of what this series is. And it also, I feel like I've tried to get every person that I know that has read them has pretty much liked them. My brother's a huge fan. I have a lot of friends that have read all of these books. Mercy Thompson is a shapeshifter. She can turn into a coyote. Obviously, that's a weird thing to have. She has had this ability since she was born, and her mother, upon coming into her crib and finding a coyote where her baby should be, went, oh crap, what do I do with this? Her mother happened to know somebody who was a werewolf. You can see I have a thing. I have a thing for supernatural books. So she was actually raised by werewolves. So she's this coyote shapeshifter who was raised by werewolves. Now she's an adult. She's a Volkswagen mechanic. She's this super, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. She's this super independent, very, very strong-willed character. She's one of my favorite, like, female characters ever because she's just super cool. I want to be Mercy Thompson, not gonna lie. And so this last book really, tons of crazy things have happened, but I recommend this series so much because once again, a lot like Hounded, it's different. Yes, it's vampires and you have a coyote shapeshifter, but there's also there's werewolves and vampires and there's fairies, they go into the fae realm, so that's a whole other thing. But what I love about these books is they're just so well done, and the characters build on each other. They're constantly growing, they're constantly learning. And I like, even though there's I think this, like I said, this was either 11 or 12. I feel like a lot of series can get stale. Hey, I'm going to write 30 books. They get real formulaic. Stephanie Plum, if you've read one, you've read 20.
Yeah.
Nothing against Stephanie Plum. I've read most of them. But they're very, very similar. This is a series that truly grows. So don't start with Smoke Bitten. I loved it. It was really, really good. Don't start there. You want to start back at the beginning because they do grow. And I love that. And I love these characters. And I love this world that Patricia Briggs has built. So don't judge the book by the cover. And definitely, if you like supernatural, if you like crazy characters, if you like fantasy, these both Patricia Briggs's World, Moon Called is the first book, and the Iron Druid series by Kevin Hearn, so fantastic, and you won't regret either one of those.
Excellent. Those sound like good reads. And Kristen.
Hey.
All right. So what I liked, Jen, was that you said you wanted comfort books. And I always feel that way. Like if there's something happening in my life that's a little like out of control or whatever, there's just something about those books or those series that like you can go to, and even though you've read them 5 or 6 times, you know what's going to happen, and it just, so I can relate to that. But the books that I'm sharing actually are, the first one I'm going to do is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This was actually the book that I was reading with my book club, and we were unfortunately not able to meet again to talk about it. But this book was amazing. It touched on so many serious topics, but the way that Trevor Noah presents it in his own personality and in the way that he does, I was cracking up. Like you kind of are juggled between this juxtaposition of, I can't believe that the world is like this, and yet you're cracking up at what's happening to him. You know, like there's a situation that happens with him and his mom, and it's a very dangerous situation. It's him and his mom and his younger brother, and she ends up pushing him out of a car, like this car that's moving. And the way that he's describing it, you're laughing while it happens. Like it's pretty hilarious because she's telling him like, get out of the car, and he's kind of pretending like he's sleeping because they've been at church all day, and so he's just kind of messing around, and she's like, you need to get out of this car, and she ends up shoving him out of the car with her foot, and then she's got like the baby brother with her, and they're trying to get away from these people who are meaning them harm. So it's in a situation that's very serious that could have gone very wrong. But the way that he's describing it as a young kid in that position, you totally relate to it. Like I appreciated that he shared all of this about his life in the way that he did. It gave me a new and really kind of the first look into the apartheid and how things were back then. And it had never occurred to me that once Nelson Mandela took over that things actually got worse. And so the basis of the book is he's born a crime because he's born during this time period, and his mother is African and his father is white. And he describes his father in this very interesting way because his father was German, and he was just this very quiet, intellectual man, and his mother is fiercely independent. She's just this confident, amazing, strong woman. And he talks about when they're in public, he can't call his father his dad. So like they'll all walk together, but his father has to kind of walk away from them. And because he is mixed, he can't even really call his mother in public. And so it's just his whole life he's had to deal with where does he belong? How does he fit in? You know, he's not white enough to be white. He's not black enough to be part of the black culture. And so he's constantly had to fall back on his wits and his humor and his skills and his smarts to fit in where he can and to make a life that he can. And so if you don't know who Trevor Noah is, he is a comedian and he does The Daily Show. And so it pans out from early youth all the way up until when he's an adult and he begins becoming a comedian. And the book is set up really interestingly because he talks about his own personal experiences in the timeline that things are changing. So it'll go through a chapter that talks about a specific part of his life, you know, like this girl that he had a crush on and how that situation affected him. And then you'll have a little space where it talks facts about what was happening in the government and what was happening in Africa at that time. And so you get this really good idea of how it related to him during that point of his life. There's one situation that is just crazy. He ends up, he becomes friends with a kid and they end up robbing this store. And so they're caught on the surveillance camera and the school gets involved and they know who his friend is, but on the surveillance camera, he looks like a different kid. They think that he's Caucasian. They don't think that he is black because his skin is lighter. And so he doesn't say anything. And he's like, he is so dumbfounded that they didn't even know it was him because his skin had changed on the camera. And the whole time he's sitting there, he's like, they have no idea that that's me. Like, they don't even think that, like, they can't even see that that's my skin tone. And I just can't, it just really put me into perspective. I can't imagine being in a situation where you don't know where you belong. And his father was there, but not in such a way that he was very supportive. He didn't not care about him, but he wasn't there. And his mother was so fiercely independent that there's an excerpt here where he gets caught doing something, and the police call his mother. He's like 10 years old, and they go, hey, we have your son. He was caught doing this. Do you want to come pick him up? And she says, no, put him in jail. Keep him there overnight. I don't want to take him. And
Wow.
the cop gets off the phone, and the cop's like, so they end up letting him go because they assume that he's some kind of orphan, because what kind of mother would be like, no, put my 10-year-old in jail? But that's how she raised him. And it was very interesting to me because while she was doing things, she would say, when you get older, you need to do this as a man. You know, if you, and Kelly, we had kind of talked about this before, but like when you get older and if you have a significant other, you need to make sure that you are helping her do these things. You need to be supportive in this way. And so she was fiercely protective, almost to the point where it was scary, but she was doing everything she could to raise him to be strong, because she knew that he was going to go through a lot of trials and people were going to look at him in a different way. I mean, I can't imagine being with your mother and father and having to you can't even walk next to them. They would be put in jail. So that book I highly recommend this book. It was a really eye-opener for me, but also just the way that Trevor Noah, if you guys are familiar with him at all, he is hilarious. The way that he says things, I wish that I could read some of this for you guys because it's great. But he did a great job talking about really important issues that are relevant and that need to be talked about, but in a way that you process it. You know, like it's not such a way that you're like, oh, I don't really want to talk about that. I don't want to read about that. He does it in a way where you have to step back and think about it like, man, that kid went through some stuff. Like, this is crazy. So I really, really enjoyed that book. The next one that I did was The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. And this was suggested to me from my book club group, because we had read another book that was closely related to this story. So this book, when I finished this book, made me feel just happy. My heart felt so full. And so it's about this main character, Harold Fry, and he lives this normal life. He does the same thing. Him and his wife don't sleep in the same room anymore. Their marriage is on the puts, but like they still live together. And so they're not even living in companionship. They're just kind of there. They pass each other on the stairs. They eat breakfast together, but they don't talk to each other. And so one day he gets this letter from this woman named Queenie, and Queenie is super sick, and he hasn't talked to Queenie in years. He used to work with Queenie. And so she writes him a letter and says, hey, I'm very ill. I just wanted to write you and let you know, the doctors say there's nothing that they can do about it. And so he just gets this idea where, okay, well, I'm going to write her a letter and I'm going to let her know that I'm thinking of her, and then I'm going to go drop it in the mailbox. And so he goes to drop it in the mailbox, and then he realizes, I don't want to just send this letter. Like, I should go give it to her. Queenie is on the other side of like the country. And so he makes this pilgrimage, this walk to Queenie. And while he's doing this pilgrimage, he meets all these interesting people on the way. And more importantly, he starts to process all the things that have happened in his life. So he starts to process like what's going on with his marriage. You end up finding that he has a son. And for a while you think that things with the son are okay with the wife, but not necessarily with Harold. And I won't give away the ending, but you end up finding this really crazy situation that happens with all of them, that they all need to go through and deal with. And so Harold ends up going through this pilgrimage, growing as a person. And while he's meeting these people, they change him and he appreciates them. And it was just a really uplifting book. Every time he met somebody new and he took in their experiences and they took in, you know, what he was doing and they supported him, it just gave you like a little like, oh my gosh, this is great. And so it really is a reflection book, and I really appreciated that. So this was a really good suggestion.
Book club. Has anybody else read Harold Fry? No, it is really good. I really loved it too.
It was,
it's a very hopeful book.
Yeah, that's like you nice. Just kind of fall in love with Harold because he's flawed. Right. He's not the perfect person. And he knows that, but he just wants to help. Like he just enjoys being around people, and he really begins to have this confidence within himself, which is kind of an amazing thing because you feel like at a certain age, you should have everything figured out. And here he is, an older gentleman, and he has nothing figured out. Like he restarted his whole life. And so that was a really great book. And the third one I just recently started, and I read it. I read the reviews and the like snippet of it. And then once I did that, I was like, ooh, this sounds a lot like the prelude to Practical Magic. So I, for some reason, can't remember what that one was. What was the one she just came out with? Alice Hoffman.
Her most recent one? I don't know.
It's the one before Practical Magic. I can't believe I forgot the title, but it'll come to me. But anyways, so The Immortalist is about the Gould children. There's 3 siblings, and they live in this giant house with their parents, and their parents they work a lot. They're really closed off with their kids. And so it's the summer of 1969, and they're just trying to figure out what to do in the summer. And then they end up talking to somebody at school, and somebody at school knows of this witch that can tell you what your future will be and when you are going to die. And so the kids are a little cautious at first, and then they end up going to find this witch. And so I am at the part where they are at the witch's door, excuse me, and they are trying to figure out if this is the best idea for them. So they are in the witch's house. Now I'm kind of like on a cliffhanger because I don't know what's going to happen next.
The prequel is called Magic Lessons.
Oh, no, that's not what it was. Magic Lessons?
Magic Lessons.
That's what the interwebs are saying, so.
Yeah, Alice Hoffman, it's the prequel to Practical Magic.
That's not what it was.
Okay.
Kristen is going to prove the interwebs wrong.
I will find this.
Well, those all sounded really interesting, and I loved Harold Fry, and I keep looking at The Immortalist because the description sounds interesting, and I still haven't picked that one up either because my to-read list just keeps getting greater and greater.
Well, you guys just gave me a few to add to my to-read list too. So
The Rules of Magic, that's what it was called.
Oh, that was 2017. When you said recent, I looked for 2020. But anyways, that says the prequel to Practical Magic is the Magic Keepers or Magic Lessons.
Maybe she has a new one coming
there's
out.
One after. Oh, well,
now Kristen has something to add.
I'm sure they're all fantastic, guys.
Oh my gosh, those are amazing. If you haven't read that series.
Oh yeah, October.
I'll have to add that.
So it's a future release. Get on the list now.
I'm like,
you're
welcome.
welcome.
I'm just gonna put myself on that list right now.
Alrighty, so I'm going to share real quickly mine. The first one is the henna artist, and I'm not going to say the last name correctly, but the author's name is Alka Joshi. And this one was just recently chosen as Reese Witherspoon's next pick for her book club, but I picked it up before she picked it. So I'm super proud of myself for that. It is set in 1955 Jaipur, India, and it centers on a single woman there named Lakshmi, who has been trying to make her way in that city for the last 15 years as a henna artist. She's an incredibly talented artist. She's got a down payment on a house, which for a single woman is amazing at that time in that place. And then her entire life is turned upside down when her estranged husband shows up on her doorstep with a 13-year-old sister that she didn't know she had because she had left home 15 years ago. And so now Lakshmi feels that she needs to take care of this sister. She's got an estranged husband that she's dealing with. She has a career that she's trying to figure out and make sure that she can keep making payments on the house. And all sorts of other things happen. And it is really good. If you like going to different places, the henna artist, I think, is going to be for you, because the setting in Jaipur is almost like another one of the characters. And it's not setting as in, you know, look at this building and then we're going to look at this building and it's 3 pages of description. Joshi is able to create that setting by the characters and what they're doing and talking about the way Lakshmi struggles because women in that time in that place weren't seen as independent, and they were seen as supporters of husbands or supporters of sons. So it's fascinating. The whole thing's fascinating. I really loved it. I was super excited when I saw Reese had picked it because it meant that it was going to get a whole lot of readers. It's available in hardcover and it's available right now in audio, which is what I did. I listened to it. The reader is fabulous. So that one was incredible. My next one is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. And this one takes place in 1829 Iceland. And it centers on a woman who existed. She's real, Agnes Magnusdóttir, and she was convicted of murder of 2 men. Her and another woman and another man were convicted of murder, but it's 1829 and the judicial system moves slowly, and it's Iceland, and rather than put her in prison, they end up housing her with a family on a farm in Iceland. And so she's forced to live with them while she is waiting for her execution. She is trying for a last attempt at an appeal, and that doesn't look great. And so she's got however long it takes for everything to be finalized and those letters to go back and forth between the different jurisdictions. And she's stuck on this farm with people who don't want her there. And the descriptions of Iceland are amazing. The subsistence farming that they're doing, how they live during that time. The characters, the mother on the farm clearly doesn't want anything to do with Agnes. She doesn't want her daughters to have anything to do with Agnes. But over time, as they are living this life together, Agnes starts to share her story of what really happened that night when those 2 men were slaughtered. It's fascinating. The author has a great note at the end about all of the historical papers that she used to write the book and what they absolutely positively know happened in Agnes's life. It was really interesting. And then my final one is probably the strangest one in the bunch, but it is also historical fiction. Mary Toft, or the Rabbit Queen by Dexter Palmer. And this one is based on an actual account. It occurred in newspapers and in pamphlets published by doctors at the time. In 1726, Mary Toft was reported to have given birth to rabbits. I know. How can you resist a book like that? And even back then, so, you know, I read that and I was like, well, clearly this is a book that I need to pick up. So, you know, because, you know, she's giving birth to rabbits. It's in the newspaper, and doctors have written pamphlets on why Mary Toft gave birth to rabbits. In 1726, they knew human beings can't give birth to rabbits. That's not a thing. Not even in 1726. They weren't like confused about biology. They knew.
Are you sure this isn't clickbait? I don't know about this.
It's not. I know it sounds like a woman gives birth to rabbits. But so they knew that this couldn't happen, and yet these doctors wrote these pamphlets saying that it did, that they saw it with their own eyes, and that they are convinced that this is a scientific miracle. And Dexter Palmer, the author, works off of that into something that is so timely right now about how our perception of reality is colored so strongly by our beliefs. Yes. And it is fascinating. There's so many layers there. You can just read it for the story and the plot and what happens with these doctors and Mary Toff. But there's a whole other layer there, and there's a central story where Palmer has one of the doctors who's more of a skeptic come, and he's observed Mary, and he starts telling the family that's housing him the story of what you think is going to be the traditional emperor's new clothes, which is also about the emperor genuinely believed he had this amazing set of clothes on that only people who, in the story, it's people who have legitimate heirs, or you are a legitimate heir that you can see the clothes. If you are not a legitimate heir, that your mother and father are not who you think they are, you won't be able to see the clothes. So you aren't going to be standing up and raising your hand and going, hey, emperor's naked. Awesome. My mom and dad, not who I think they are. You're not going to do that. So he's starting to tell this traditional story, and then it shifts into the most chilling ending. And I can't give it away, because if you read the book, you're going to get to that story and you're going to go, like, my jaw literally dropped. I was like, because you're expecting it to end how it always does, and it doesn't. And the whole thing turns on this idea of what is truth and why do we believe what we believe, and why do we sometimes have self-deception where we're convinced this thing over here is absolutely true, and then later on, whether it's, you know, a few days later you read something, you go, that wasn't right, or it's a whole lifetime where you suddenly go, oh, you know, I always thought thing X was this, but maybe it's not. It's fascinating. That's awesome. It is quite dark. I will say that. The scenes of Mary giving birth to the rabbits are pretty graphic. So it's not for everybody. But Mary Toff giving birth to rabbits. You know, this is the thing.
You would think giving birth to a rabbit would be physically easy.
I'm so weird. I feel like I can get people to do it. And it's on RB Digital as an audio. I read it, but it is on RB Digital as an audiobook. So if you listen to it and it's great, I hope it is. I didn't listen to it. I read it.
I'm trying it now.
Did you say the story was based in Florida? I just want to clarify. Was it Florida?
Like
I know.
Florida woman gives birth to rabbits.
Yeah, all the weird stuff. Sorry, Florida, but all the weird stuff goes down in your state. So those are my 3 books. I seem to be reading. I'm not usually a historical fiction person. I'm usually kind of a weird thriller horror person. But for some reason during this time, I was drawn to books not set in my time period and not set in my place that I'm in. I was drawn to things that are completely different. That's
can't go outside, so you might as
to
well
my
go to India.
Subconscious with what's going on. But they were in their own ways, they were great reads. So I want to thank all of you for doing this first ever Literary Libations with Librarians. And thank you for your time. And maybe we'll see your faces again as we rotate through the staff next week, or next time we do this, because I can't guarantee it'll be a week. Our next theme is going to be books that make you happy, books that make you laugh out loud, books that just bring you that sense of comfort, whatever it might be, but it'll be books that make you happy. Thank you to everybody who watches this. Tune in next time, because we're going to keep changing things up and we'll try new things. And if you got feedback, we'd love to hear that on whatever platform you happen to watch this on. So thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.